Back, everyone, to OpenLine. Glad you were with us, talking with elder care attorney Tim Takacs, just about how do you plan for getting older? How do you plan financially? What are some of the questions you should be asking? And always glad to have Tim Takacs with us. And let's go to the phones. And I believe we have Taylor. Is this Taylor?
Yeah, this is Taylor. Thank you, Ben, and Mr. Takacs. Always glad to see you on here. I have got a question that's not totally far-fetched, but it's a little different than what I often hear on there. I'm wanting to set up a 539 plan for a 4-year-old grandson, one of the educational funds. And I've looked at a lot of information on these, and I can't seem to come up with one that I think gives me the most. I'll put it in my daughter's name, not in my name, for the grandson. But there's so many different ways to go with that, because some of them are strictly for higher education. Some of them have more flexibility, because we have no idea what will take place over the next 16, 18 years with a young son. So I'm just wanting to know from your experience with maybe other clients, which ones might have the absolute most flexibility for the use of the money. Could I use it for a 7th grader or a 4th grader? So any information you can share from your experience would be appreciated.
Great. Taylor, thank you. What a great grandfather. I love that question. It's the first time I've heard that question on here. What about that?
And let's sort of kind of explain a little bit of, or set the scene here, is what Taylor is referring to is what's called a 529 plan. I think he mentioned it was a 530, unless I misheard him. But it is a 529 plan. I'm not at all an expert or even very fluent in 529 plans. My understanding of how they work is that they are available through the state. There may be, I think, a plan, that is available through the state of Tennessee, 529 plan. I am not certain whether Taylor could say go to a plan in like maybe, Mississippi or California or Montana or whatever it is. I tend to think that it sounds like Taylor has been doing a lot of research, on how those plans work. As I understand, it's essentially what a 529 plan is that it's a way for, frankly, I guess any individual to set aside money, for the benefit of some person's, I guess, presumably a minor or others, education, that sort of thing. So I've just about exhausted my knowledge on this, Ben.
Okay, so that's not something you deal with a lot. Let me ask you this. So Taylor wants to help. Taylor wants to set aside money for his grandkid, it sounds like.
Yes.
And it was interesting to me when I hear that, I think, okay, he wants to pay for college. Then I hear him say, would it be available in like the 7th grade? We don't know what's going to happen. All of that's true. We don't know what's going to happen. What about a trust and those kind of things? I know you love those things. Is that appropriate here, or you're not going to give advice on this specific thing, but how would that work in a situation like this?
I think really it's kind of one of those things where, if you, let's say that you came to someone like me and said, look, I would like to, I'd like to set up a trust for, my grandchildren. In fact, I had that case today, believe it or not. I did it. I recently, we were hired by a married couple who wanted to set aside, a few, several $100,000s for their grandchildren. And so they were, after we had a conversation about how that works, that they had identified a trustee, someone that would be the person that would be holding the assets, over the long haul. they went ahead and went forward with that. So we set up an irrevocable trust for their grandchildren. Now, a 529 plan, as I understand it, there are states that have 529 plans where essentially it doesn't, to my understanding or to my limited knowledge of it is that, you have maybe someone from the state of Tennessee that is in charge of the Tennessee 529 plan, and so a parent or a grandparent or whoever it is, contacts the state of Tennessee and says, I would like to set money aside for, my grandchildren's education. And my guess is that there's a minimal expense because basically it's presumably there's a large amount of money that the state would be able to accumulate in that trust, and so they would be able to invest it, and basically that's how the fund would be in some ways self-supporting.
And so when I say trust, I guess that's a little off, because that would maybe be more money than what Taylor's probably talking about. Taylor wants to set aside maybe a few $1,000s. Trusts were a lot more money. So that's a little
lot
different.
more, certainly, because a lot of that depends on, needless to say, in the case that I have is because those types of trusts are, they're more, the person that's setting up the trust has more control.
Right.
They would select the trustee. Some of them could be their own trustee. And so they have a lot of options as to how the funds are being used, what happens to the funds after, let's say they're not used for education, or let's say that there's money left after the person is educated, or all sorts of things, or maybe the child or the person dies before the fund is exhausted, what happens to the money. So there's a lot more flexibility in those types of arrangements.
Okay. All right. Taylor, thank you. Thank you for that call. I haven't heard that, and I'm interested in that. Thank you, Taylor.
And just as a FYI, that might be an interesting OpenLine.
Yeah, really. I like that. Yeah.
Maybe an interesting OpenLine guest, somebody from the state comes on and says, okay, let's talk about what options that people have, that we can provide for them.
Provide for their education. Let's go to Larry, who is waiting. Hello, Larry.
Yes.
Go right ahead.
Hello. Yeah. Here's going to appreciate you getting me on here. Is yes, my stepfather and my mother owned a home, and she died a couple years ago with ALS unexpectedly, and my stepfather, he was going to take the money out of sell the house and go into like a leisure living for elderly people, and he got COVID, and it was just a bad thing. It happened all of a sudden last summer, and he died with COVID. So I have brothers, stepbrothers and sisters. So my dad was a stepfather, and my mother, and they were both owners of the home. But they ended up, the stepbrothers and sisters took the money of the sale of the house, and they just split it up between them. And I was wondering, was I entitled for a portion of that after that all happened? It was just kind of a bad deal.
Yeah. Okay, that's interesting. Thank you, Larry. I'm sorry that happened.
Yeah. What
about this situation?
Well, it sounds like that when Larry's mother, when she married or when she remarried or whatever, so she marries, Larry's stepfather, and maybe they purchased, maybe she and the stepfather purchased a house together. But it sounds like if the house had been titled to both the mother and the stepfather, when the mother died, then the property then became, the house was owned by the stepfather.
Oh, I see. Yeah. So when that happens,
then it belongs to the stepfather,
and it can go however. Okay.
Yeah, I Ben, years ago, I remember, and I still talk about this case from time to time. I had I had one of our guests, I believe, was on, or someone that called in on OpenLine, and was the person that called in was the woman that got the house, when her husband died. They married, late in life or whatever, and he'd been married before and she'd been married before, and he died and left the house to her, or the property to her, as the stepfather. And so she called in and asked me, she says, well, do I need to share any of this, this property, with my stepchildren? And the answer I gave was no. I mean, she could if she wanted to, if she felt like that was the thing that she wanted to do or thought that was the right thing to do. But obviously, her husband, who left it to her, either should have known what he was doing or wanted to do what he did, or if he didn't know what he was doing, legally, the property belonged to her.
Wow. And that's just the way that goes. Okay.
Yeah. And I remember that case vividly because she explained that, apparently her husband owned a lot of, was a fairly prominent landowner in that area, of the county, and that's how property got basically out of the family.
Oh, very interesting. Okay. We can talk about that if we talk about wills, which sometimes we do a little bit later. But that's all very interesting to me, how it all passes, why wills are important.
Right.
But that's very interesting. Okay, we're going to take a break. I believe we have another call on here. We'll wait, take that call when we come back. Take a break. Be back right after this.